Okay, so where we've left off is we have our contract here. We have our create application method where we set a proposal and store it in global state. And then when we call get proposal, we return the value saved in our global state. So now the next thing we want to do is we want to update this contract so that people can actually vote. And so, oh, actually, before we continue, let me just say to get caught up, if you are not at this point in the code, if you're in the TSBNR repo, you just do a git checkout v103. Okay, so what we want to do is we're going to save votes in our global state. So I'm going to say votes total, so the total number of votes. This is going to be a global state key. This time we're going to be saving a number. And what we want to do is I'm just going to create a new method called vote. This is going to be void. And we're going to simply do this dot votes total dot value. Never forget your dot values equals this dot votes total dot value list one. Now you might be asking why we can't just do this. This is not yet supported in TEALScript. Hopefully by the time you're watching this video, it has been added in, but for now, we got to explicitly write out this votes total dot value. Okay, so what we expect to happen is every time we call vote, the amount of votes will increase. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to come down here and I'm going to make a method getVotes. This is going to return a number and oops. And in here, I'm just going to simply return this dot votes total dot value. So very similar pattern to what we did with our proposal, except of course this time we're doing a number and we have a function to explicitly increase it. And I should mention that by default, if you don't set a value on your global state, it's just going to default to 0. So the first time we call vote, this is simply going to be 0. So let's go ahead first, actually make sure that we build, and then we're going to go ahead and update our vote function, or update our test, I should say. So the first thing I want to do is let's go ahead and make a test, and we're going to call this vote and get votes. And we're going to define our async test. What we're going to do is we're going to await app client dot vote. And then we're going to say const votes after is going to be equal to await dot, oops, excuse me, not dot, await app client dot get votes. Okay, and then here we write our test much like before. We expect votes after dot return dot value of not to be 1. Okay, so if I go ahead, do an npm run test, and this is a good thing to mention, I forgot about. So in our contract, we're returning a number, and by default in the AVM, every number is an unsigned 64-bit integer. So the problem is in JavaScript, we can't work with numbers that big, right? The default number type can't get that big. So I guess we can't use that notation. So we need to specify that the number being returned is a big int. So we expect this getVotes function to return a value, and we expect it to be a big int type because it represents an unsigned 64-bit integer, which cannot be represented through a JavaScript number. And that's why we can see here expected 1 received 1n. So if we go ahead and run that again, that 1n just means it was a big int. So we go ahead and run that again. And we can now see that we have indeed passed our test. Okay, so we've implemented a vote functionality, but what we want is not only for people to say, yes, I support this proposal, but allow people to be actively against a proposal. So right now, if someone wants to vote in favor of the proposal, they simply call this vote function, and that increments the counter, and all is good. However, what we want to happen is we want our vote function to now take in an argument for whether we support it or not. And what we're going to do is, so let me write in the comments what we want to do. So change this method to support to allow the user to say if they are in favor or not. And then down here, change this method to return total votes and votes in favor. Okay, so you can pause this video if you want and think about how you might implement this. I'll give you a second to do that, but we're just going to continue right on here in this video, kind of showing the solution, how we do that. So if you want to take some time to figure out, how you might approach this yourself, pause the video, or for the boot camp, we'll pause it for you and we can, talk about ways to do this. Otherwise, if you just want to see the solution right away, just keep watching. So here, what we'll do, and I assume if you don't want to see the solution yet, you pause by now. So let's get into the actual code. So what we want to do is we want to come to our vote method, and we're going to change this and add in a single argument called in favor, and we're going to set that to be a Boolean. And what we're going to do is we're also going to come over to our properties up here. We're going to define votes in favor, and that's going to be global state key, and that's also going to be a number. Okay. So basically what we want to happen is we want to increase our votes total regardless, and then have an if condition. If in favor, this dot votes in favor dot value equals this dot votes in favor not value plus 1. Okay, so now our vote function, it'll increment not only the votes total, but the votes in favor. So if I do an npm run build here, we'll see that our app client.vote method now expects in favor. I'm going to change in favor. I'll change it to true. And let's go ahead and actually run these tests, make sure everything works, and then we'll update our getVotes function to return an array of both the in favor and the total votes. Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to update this function to return an array. So I'm going to come over down to getVotes, and I'm going to simply have it return number. Okay. And so down here, we're going to return this votes in favor dot value. Always remember our dot values, and this dot votes total dot value. And at this point, we should do a npm run build. In our test, we should now see, or actually, the test framework isn't aware of our types. So what we actually are going to do is let's just run this test as is right now and see what happens. So the only thing we've changed between now and the last test is this method now returns an array. And we can see we expected 1n, but we got 1n, 1n. So let's do a couple things here. So first, we're going to change this. Oops. To be big 1n. Oh, sorry. Get rid of the n. And I think we also, let me check my notes. Yes, we also need to change this to be dot to equal. Okay, so now if we come down here and run it again, we should see that we've now passed. Now, one other thing we're going to want to do is if we come into our same test that we just ran, we want to test the opposite case. So we're going to await app client.vote in favor, let's set it to false. And we're going to basically do the same thing. And we're going to expect that this first number, so our votes in favor is going to stay 1, but our votes total is going to increase. So let's go ahead and run that. Okay, and so now we can see that our tests are passed. So our vote functionality worked with our in favor is true and worked with our in favor set to false. So now at this point, what we've demonstrated is that we can expand our usage of global state to contain information about our votes, and not only the total votes, but also our votes in favor. Now, the obvious problem with this, however, is that we don't have any way of ensuring that, a given user can't vote multiple times, right? That person can always come in and change their vote. Anyone, whether they've been involved with the DAO before, can vote. And the biggest issue is that you are exposing yourself to Sybil attacks. So in the blockchain, anyone can create an address and participate in the network. So if one person really liked a proposal or really didn't like a proposal, they could just make thousands of addresses and vote in, however they want to. And so what we want to do is think about mechanisms in which we could deploy to prevent that from happening. So we are, normally I say, think about how you want to do this. However, if you're new to Algorand, give you kind of a sneak peek on what we're going to be doing next, we're going to be working with ASAs. So if you're new to Algorand, it's going to be a bunch of new concepts. So it'll be kind of hard to implement on yourself. But if you're experienced with Algorand and you want to explore with how ASAs work, what we're basically going to be doing in the next one is using ASAs to ensure that people are properly registering for the DAO. So we'll be getting to that in the next session. Again, there isn't really any sort of task or anything between now and then. So if you're interested in learning how we implement tokens for our DAO, then I'll catch you in the next video. See you then.